The PlayStation 2 is one of the most popular consoles of all time. In fact, it held the title of the most sold gaming console for over 20 years, and as of writing this video, it is still the most sold console, barely ahead of the Nintendo DS and the Nintendo Switch. And with that in mind, it's no surprise that this console also had a lot of games available for it, with over 4,000 games released on the system. And among that, over 400 of them could be categorized as racing or driving games. Some of them are cult classics, while some others were commercial failures and are completely forgotten nowadays. So I wanted to try some racing games for the PS2 that not a lot of people remember or even know they exist. Which is what led me to pick 10 obscure Japanese racing games that were released on PS2 to then review them. Some of them did get a release out of Japan, while some others didn't. I also limited my choice to one game per series to keep it as varied as possible. I've played all of these games on PCSX2, so unfortunately I can't talk about the performance on actual hardware, but I'm not gonna buy a Japanese PS2 and a capture card just for one video. Anyway, let's get started. Welcome to the world of obscure Japanese racers. And here is our first game. Released in December 2003 in Japan by Next Entertainment, Battle Gear 3 is actually a part of the arcade title of the same name. It is quite obviously inspired by Initial D, even in its art style. Graphically, the game looks really good, which is not a surprise as it is an arcade port. The colors are vibrant and it could remind you of some of the classic Sega arcade games. As a Japan exclusive, the game is in Japanese only, meaning that if you don't speak Japanese, you may get lost in the menus, especially since it's one of the rare games to have menus fully in Japanese. The main game mode is the Battle Gear Challenge. To access it, you'll need an ID and password. This is actually an interesting way to make a DRM. Basically, every copy of the game comes with an ID and password, and you need to type these in the game to access the main game mode. Let's be honest, it's a very inefficient DRM system because all it takes is one person to post their ID and password online and everyone can play the game for free. But I think this is more of a leftover of the arcade version where you probably had to use an ID and password to save your personal progress on the arcade machines. Anyway, in this game mode you can pick 4 starter cars, one for each class. Once you've chosen these starter cars, all the others are locked and will be unlocked by beating them in the class challenges, which are some kind of boss-rush mode where you can challenge every car of your class. There is also an extra S-Class that you can only do after unlocking an S-Class car from the A-Class challenge. The tracks in these games are absolutely beautiful. They have the vibe of a mix between Ridge Racer and Initial D. Unfortunately, there are only 8 tracks in the game, which is a bit unfortunate, but the quality of each of them is so high that you can go over that. Most of the tracks are purely fictional, except for the 2 Touge stages, which are reproductions of the Aruna and Apogahara mountain roads. They are generally tighter than other tracks, and that's where I feel like the handling feels a bit weird, but maybe I just have skill issues. Speaking of handling, it's actually pretty good. Very arcade focused, and when I say arcade, I'm saying it in its original meaning. The handling is reminiscent of the games released on arcade cabinets during that era. But don't get fooled, you can't just drift every corner at full speed like in Ridge Racer. You still need to slow down quite a lot to take sharper corners. That doesn't prevent the game to be biased toward drifting however, just be sure to control your angle. As for the car selection, the game offers a wide variety of Japanese licensed cars, going from sport cars to compacts and even some tune cars, featuring a total of 60 vehicles. Unfortunately, as the game was made and marketed in Japan, it doesn't include any foreign cars. But that's to be expected. You can also see the cars from the inside, as there is actually an interior view, which is pretty rare on PS2 games, so that's a neat little touch. So as a conclusion, Battle Gear 3 is a fun arcade racer inspired by Initial D that has a lot of charm and stunning scenery. The quality of the gameplay makes up for the lack of content. It is truly a shame that it was never released outside of Japan. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Not more because of the collisions that are a little bit weird and the lack of a pause menu. Yeah, you heard it right. Well, that's a good start. Hopefully all the games on this list are as good as this one. Oh boy, where do I even start? The title screen speaks for itself, right? Released in 2004 by Tamsoft, which apparently made some of the PS1 Chorokyu games, so we can't say they have no experience. Car Racing Challenge is one of the worst games I've ever played. Let's summarize it very quickly. A politician was falsely accused of something, you're a detective and have all the evidence that she is innocent, but her trial starts in 4 hours in Tokyo, and you're in Nagoya. And also the corrupt police will try to stop you. So there it is, that's the plot. You have to drive on the actual 1:1 scale highway from Nagoya to Tokyo. How fun could this be? After all, you drive on highways in Tokyo Extreme Racer, right? Well, the trip is split into 6 levels, each of them being 20 to 40 minutes long depending on how fast you go. So the game becomes quite boring very quickly. You start in a pretty fast car, but it has a health bar and once it's broken, you'll have to steal another car on the highway. You can also run out of fuel, but good luck trying to not break the car before that. So at least you don't just do 300 kilometers in the same car for 2 hours, so it's not that boring. Well, that would be true if the environment wasn't literally always the same. All you see is the same assets over and over again, with the only bit of variation coming from some scripted fog and rain that are tied to specific locations. Yo, at least that's funny. That's one of the rare fun things in this game. When the traffic does that. To others, at least it's funny. When it does that to you, it's less funny. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. The controls are absolutely atrocious. Not only it is very sensitive, but there is no analog steering, meaning it's all or nothing. This game was released in 2004, by the way, and somehow this is not even the only game that will play today that has this issue. If you release the accelerator, the steering becomes even more sensitive and any steering input will push you straight into a wall. On top of that, the collisions with traffic are very frustrating and inconsistent. You'll often slightly clip a car that you shouldn't have clipped, and even the slight crash can be very punishing. Your car will receive a lot of damage and your top speed will be reduced. It gets somehow even worse when it's raining because the steering becomes even more sensitive, which I didn't think was possible, but I was wrong, I guess. Anyway, I think we've talked more than enough about this game. I'll just give it a 2 out of 10 and move on. Now, after such a bad game, I had high hopes for the next game to be better than that. And I was not disappointed. I have so many things to say about this game. D1 Professional Drift Grand Prix Series, which we're just gonna call D1 GP for the rest of this video, was released in the US in August 2006. It is a localized version of D1 GP 2005, which was released a year prior in Japan only, and was the sequel to the original D1 Grand Prix game, also a Japanese exclusive game. It is also developed by Touge, a studio that generally develops wrestling games, and also they made The Dog Happy Life and The Dog Island. Do whatever you want with this information. As the title suggests, this game is an officially licensed drift game based on the D1 Grand Prix series, a famous Japanese drift championship. The game features over 30 real-life drivers with the car that they were driving in the 2005 season. The Japanese version of the game even features the 3 official commentators, Tsuchiya, Suzuki and Orido. The US version also has them, but only as bonus characters that you can play as or against. The US version also still has real-time commentators, but they aren't the official ones. Though it's still kinda accurate, as one of the commentators has the same sense of humor as Tsuchiya. The main game mode here is the D1 Series game mode, where you can play any season from 2001 to 2005. Each season is composed of 5 to 7 rounds, and in each round you have to do 3 qualifying runs to reach the top 16, and if you do, you're in a tournament bracket and have to win drift battles until you reach the final and win the last round. You have no reset allowed in this game mode, which makes it pretty difficult when you're a beginner. You can also create your own season where you can decide what tracks are used for all 7 rounds out of the 12 tracks to pick from. There is no limit to what you can pick, so if you want to pick the same track 7 times, nothing can stop you. You also have some extra modes in Quick Race, like Time Attack, which in my opinion is not really interesting as the ending is made for drifting, but why not? Then there is the Battle mode, where you can battle against the AI around 2 full laps of the track of your choice in a race or in a drift battle. There is also Survival, which is a boss rush where you have to beat every driver in the game in a row, with some of them being kind of unconventional. And lastly, the Extreme mode, where you have a few challenges to pass, with some of them being genuinely difficult.
Good speed, fast man. Speed. You idiot.
This game mode only unlocks after you've beaten every season, including a custom one. During your playthrough, you'll unlock a bunch of movies and compilations of real D1 Grand Prix footage, unfortunately fully in Japanese and not subtitled. Though watching these still really made me wanna watch all D1 series, as it looks quite fun. There are a total of 54 movies to unlock, though unfortunately it seems that nobody knows how to unlock all of them. I tried all I could, but I still had a few of them missing, which is very unfortunate as I really wanted to 100% this game. Now let's talk about the most important, the physics. The handling model is definitely arcade, but it has a lot of realistic elements to it. I highly recommend playing without the assists and in manual, as it gives you a lot more control over what you're doing. I also recommend using expert cars as they have more tuning options, so you can adjust your tune to the track. For example, at Fuji you'll need long gears and high engine power, but that's not the case for Daiba. You can also use the Pro cars, but you can't tune them unfortunately, which is why I recommend the expert cars. Also, each car feels different to drive and it's kinda neat. Overall, the feeling of the drifting felt very nice to me. It was a bit difficult at times, but I eventually got used to it, which leads me to probably the most divisive topic in this game, the difficulty. At launch, this game had unfortunately a quite negative reception, with a metascore of 45 and IGN giving it a 37. However, if you read that review, you'll probably come to the same conclusion as me. And to be fair, the game is actually hard. You need to take your time to understand it and get better at it. Don't expect to win your first championship easily. As I said, there are no restarts. If you make one mistake, it's over. Just like in real life. There is a tutorial that you're forced to do to unlock the D1 series, and it is actually helpful, but it will still take you some practice to really get good at the game. Among the things that make the game quite difficult, there is the AI and the scoring system. Overall, you earn points from sharp drift angles, high-speed drifts, and from keeping a drift for a long period of time. It's a fine way to score, even though you can't score points wherever you want. Swerving in a straight line won't give you any points, and sometimes it is a bit stupid, as for example, Fuji 2005's drift zone starts and ends very late, forcing you to hold a drift in a straight line for quite a bit of time, as you will get points penalty for stopping the drift too early. In a drift battle though, you can score more points for sneaking into the inside right next to your opponent while chasing. Unfortunately, the AI will often take a line that's really hard to follow, sometimes almost stopping on the track or being completely on the outside of the corner, and you get nothing for overtaking them. You can also get penalties for going off the track or hitting your opponent, but the opponent can also get these penalties, so don't hesitate to brake check them. As you can see, I really like this game. And damn, I'm not even a fan of real life competitive drifting. I didn't even know what D1 was before playing this game. And you know what? This game changed this. I am now so curious about the sport overall, and it's all thanks to this game. I think it is an absolutely great game for anyone who's not afraid to sink some time into it and who wants to discover how competitive drifting was in the 2000s. As much as I like the game, I'm forced to admit that it could definitely have some improvements here and there. The game surely isn't beginner friendly at all, but if you're patient enough, you'll be rewarded with a really fun game to play. With all of that being said, I'm giving this game a well-deserved 8 out of 10. I'm just so glad that this game exists that I'd feel bad to give it a rating any lower than that. And hopefully the next games on this list will be as good as this one. Released less than a month after the PlayStation 2's launch, Driving Immersion Type S aims to be the first driving simulation on the system. That's not exactly the game that we're gonna play though, as we'll play the NTSCU version, which was released a year later with a tiny bit of extra content and better handling. Mark those words. Let's start with the positives. Graphically, it destroys the competition. At the time, the main competitors were Gran Turismo 2 and Sega GT. The game even has a full 3D interior view with a different interior for every car. PS2 games with an interior view are generally quite rare, but this is almost a launch title as well. However, the graphics are probably the only place where this game shines, unfortunately. In every other aspect, the game is worse than the competition. The car list is pretty okay, as it features some quite uncommon brands for the time, like Porsche or Ferrari, for a total of 43 cars. While it doesn't sound like a lot, it is at least very diverse for the time, and it is worth pointing out that these models were quite high quality for the time, with even 3D modeled interiors. For the track selection, the game only features 8 tracks in 5 different locations, including Suzuka, Tsukuba, and 3 fictional tracks which look pretty decent. I actually think these tracks are better than the ones in Sega GT, though the bar isn't very high. In terms of progression, there is unfortunately no career mode. Only an arcade Type S mode where you basically have to win a race on every track, on every difficulty, to unlock all the cars. Because of that, the game is very short, as I personally completed the arcade mode in just over 3 hours. Despite that, the game still felt repetitive very quickly, so maybe it's a good thing that it wasn't any longer. But now let's address the elephant in the room, the controls. Remember when I said that Car Racing Challenge wasn't the only one to miss analog controls? Well, in this one you're even forced to use the D-pad to steer. Well, at least that's what I thought when I initially played the game, but I found out later that by pressing the analog button on the DualShock controller you can also switch to left stick steering, but we're gonna talk more about that later. However, handling wise, it's actually the polar opposite of Car Racing Challenge. The steering is extremely floaty and unresponsive. When driving with no assist, you'll often spin out without having a chance to get your car back on the track. And when you use the assist, the game will often heavily countersteer whenever you're slightly sliding. But since the cars don't have any grip and are very floaty, you're just constantly fighting against the assist to make your car go where you want to. It's still better than with no assists, but it's definitely not great. I kinda got the hang of it after a few hours, but that was still quite a mess. But what about the joystick controls, you may ask? Well, it's just as bad, if not worse. It feels extremely unresponsive and it becomes blatant in the autocross driving line challenges, which I didn't talk about, but it's just 4 Gran Turismo-like licenses that unlock you some extra cars. They are not more interesting than the rest of the game. Anyway, I think we've said enough about this game. It always had a bad reputation and I now understand why, and despite all of its flaws, I still want to give it a 3 out of 10 just for the few good points it has. In the end, my sentiment towards this game was just disappointment. I don't think of it like some kind of terrible shovelware, but more like a good potential that was wasted. But I had better hopes for the next game. Turns out D1GP wasn't Touge's first attempt at making a racing game, as in 2002 they released Edit Racing for the Japanese market. The game resembles a lot to games like Outrun 2 or Ridge Racer, but with a twist. The tracks have a bunch of shortcuts and even dynamic events, like this tower falling apart for example. The main game mode is a small career mode where you have to win 7 championships. You're given a bit of cash and have to buy a car, win races to buy upgrades for it or to buy a better car. All of the cars in these games are unlicensed roadsters inspired by real life cars, which will remind some of you of Roadster Trophy. This game also features some kind of shoulder camera, I don't know how to call it, which is kinda neat. It also adds a bit of transparency to the frame of the windshield to improve the visibility with this camera. There's also the usual chase and bumper camera as well. The handling is fine and definitely reminiscent of the arcade handling style that was popular back in the days, however the drifting really lacks grip in my opinion. You're incentivized to avoid drifting at all costs, which is a bit sad for a game like this, especially since the cars tend to slide very easily. This also makes them handle poorly in sharp corners, and the AI will fly past you as they are literally on rails.
Bye, have a great time!
But that's where another functionality of this game comes in, tuning. It's very minimalistic, but yes, you can adjust the setup of your car in this game by changing the tire compound, adjusting the gearing or tweaking the suspensions, which can be quite useful sometimes. The game is quite easy at the start, but you'll probably struggle a bit after the first few championships, as the AI's rubber band becomes less and less forgiving. On top of that, the collision model seems to be made with the explicit intent to frustrate you. In the end, what made my playthrough much easier was to buy a suspension upgrade and apply the grip preset, which made the car a lot more grippy, although I had to take some time to adapt my driving style. Even after this, the AI still felt like they were cheating in the sharper corners, but I was smoking them everywhere else. For the track selection, there are 8 environments with 3 tracks each, and you'll have a weird feeling driving on them. Oftentimes you'll think, wait, I've been there, but right after you're in a brand new place. This is because the tracks in these games are all made out of a set number of set pieces that are assembled like Legos. It is a bit like Ridge Racer Unbounded, but without the grid limitations. It also means you can build your own tracks, hence why it's called Edit Racing. However, not only the editor is the least user-friendly UI I have ever seen, but it is also very limited as you have a very tight memory limit to not exceed. So I quickly gave up on this one, but if you can understand the editor and make something cool with it, I'd love to see that. Though the 24 regular tracks are decent enough selection, and the 8 environments offer a good enough variety for a game of that scope. It also has a bunch of features that I personally found a bit useless and are underexploited, like for example pitting mechanics and dynamic weather, which could have been useful to add if all the races in the career mode weren't only 3 laps long. You also have a mailbox in the game, but with all the emails that you receive being in Japanese, I have no idea if any of what they say is useful. To conclude, I'll say that this game, while not being a hidden gem, is a curiosity that is definitely worth checking out. The game is quite short as I've beaten it in just under 5 hours, with save states cause the ways I was failing were just unfair. It is sad that the devs spent time and effort into a bunch of poorly implemented features instead of refining the physics and AI, but in my opinion the game is still decent enough to deserve a 6 out of 10. So we've done half of the game so far, and the TLDR is good, bad, good. I'm seeing a pattern that doesn't look promising for our next game. Released in 2002 in Japan and 2004 in Europe, Maxed Out Racing is a racing game that seems to be themed around modified cars in the style of the Bosozoku subculture. A very over-the-top customization trend that is mostly done on bikes but is also done on cars like in this game. Maxed Out Racing was developed by the Prix publisher, who apparently helped to develop Car Racing Challenge, so this is not a good sign. Well, at least I can tell you now that it has analog controls, which I didn't expect to bring up as a positive aspect before starting this series, as it would be like opening an open door, but apparently it's not as common as I thought it was. Maxed Out Racing only has one solo game mode, which is the regular career mode. You have to buy yourself a car among a selection of 12 pre-tuned rides, which to be honest look kinda awesome. Unfortunately, you can't change their body kits, which is quite a shame but not surprising. At least you can upgrade their performance, change their stickers, the exhaust and of course, the honk. The customization is pretty weak, but I let that pass as Need for Speed Underground didn't even exist back then, and the only other game to offer more than just a bunch of rims and color changes on the system was Tokyo Extreme Racer 0. Unfortunately, the customization might be the only highlight of this game, as the physics are absolutely terrible. Releasing the accelerator while turning will lead to a slide, and the longer you release the sharper the angle, and you're very likely to spin out. On the first track you don't even need to release anyway, you can just full throttle all the way. But the worst part is the traffic. The traffic cars are war tanks that don't even acknowledge your existence even when you hit them at 200 km an hour. And considering this game's tracks are full of blind spots, expect to hit quite a few traffic cars before you could even see them. The best part of this game is that it's extremely short. It took me an hour and a half to complete the game, with save states again because I don't really like when my car spins out into a wall or when it slightly hits a bump on the road that gets flipped. But yeah, the career mode consists of defeating 12 rivals. That's it, 12 1v1 races to win and nothing else. On top of that, the game only has 4 tracks, and not even reverse variants. Anyway, I think we've seen enough of this game. I'll give it a 3 out of 10 just for the cool cars and customization, but now let's move on to a better game. Runabout 3 is the last entry in the Runabout series, which is a series about over-the-top driving missions and reckless driving. It is the only entry of the series on the PS2 and it seems like the budget was not that high. It's even part of the Simple 2000 series, which is known for its wide catalog of budget titles. In Runabout 3 you have to complete 9 various missions while causing absolute carnage in the city of New York. Well, that's what you think after doing the first mission. But then the second one is an 11-minute follow mission. It is so boring that speedrunners made a category where they do every mission except this one. All the missions take place in a semi-open world. Let me explain. They all take place on the same map, which is a reproduction of Manhattan, but each of them has different areas blocked off. It's kinda sad that you can't free roam the whole map in my opinion, but it's still better than just having point-to-point missions. In terms of handling, it's pretty okay. It's very slidey, but that's to be expected for a game like this. Though the tank handles really badly, which is a shame. I literally couldn't keep it in a straight line, as it was permanently oversteering despite being extremely slow. Bumps, jumps and collisions can also completely fling your car into the air, which is very funny and fits perfectly the over-the-top vibe of the game. Graphically, the game is exactly at the level of what you would expect from a PS2 budget title from 2002. It doesn't look great, but it does the job. The main drawback of this game though is that it unfortunately lacks a lot of content, as you'll complete all the 9 missions in an hour and a half. You do unlock the Spec B version of each mission after completing it once, which doesn't mean that the AI drives it for you like in Gran Turismo, but it's just the same mission with more difficult goals. After completing the Spec B version, you'll unlock the Spec A, which adds even more difficulty. But having to redo the same missions over and over again, especially that stupid tailing mission, is quite tedious and boring. I'll give this game a 5.5 out of 10 just for its wackiness and because you can actually have quite a bit of fun on it, just not for long sadly. But now it's time for what is my best find of this entire video, but not for the reasons that you'd expect. Shinseiki GPX Cyber Formula Road to the Infinity, or Future GPX Cyber Formula Road to the Infinity, is a racing game released in 2003 and based on an anime called, drumroll, Future GPX Cyber Formula, which was released in 1991 and had 4 OVA sequels which released until 1998. The game is mostly based on these OVAs as the car and character list suggests. Before I talk more about the game, after I played it I went to watch the anime as well as all the OVAs and I can only recommend you to watch it. I don't watch anime very often, but this one was really enjoyable to watch. Just don't expect the racing stuff to make too much sense. Like really, at some point they do almost 1,000 kilometers without refueling and changing tires. Anyway, I'm not selling it very well, but trust me, watch the anime, you won't regret it. Now let's get back to the game, shall we? Curiously, watching the anime made me both like the game more and less than I did before. Of course I liked the fact that I was recognizing the characters from the anime, their cars and even some of the tracks, but it also made me realize that this game could have been much better. There are a lot of features and content that could have been implemented, but the worst part by far in my opinion is how the game feels. As you can see in the gameplay footage, the game feels very slow. Most cars can reach over 600 km per hour. It should feel a lot faster than this. And ironically, I think one of the causes of this is that the cars are too powerful. The 0 to 500 is almost instant, the brakes are really powerful and the grip levels are really high. I think a slightly more realistic handling model would have been beneficial to the game. Furthermore, the camera is absolutely static, no dynamic FOV, no camera shake, no motion blur, nothing besides a very slight speeding effect while boosting. But considering the boost mechanic is designed to be used specifically in long straights, it feels very slow as you just do nothing for 10 seconds. The collisions are also very wacky. The hitboxes of the cars are very wide and touching anything will heavily slow you down instantly. Overall, the physics in these games just feel too flat and oversimplified, and added up to the lack of camera effects make the game feel very slow and quite boring after a bit. Another fact that contributes to make this game feel boring is the sheer amount of content that it has. Despite only offering 11 tracks, the game should take you over 25 hours to complete, with 8 Grand Prix, 15 survival races, 50 point matches, and 22 time trials. Survival races and point matches are all 3 races of 3 laps, but the Grand Prix tend to be quite long near the end, especially the last one which consists of 12 races of 10 laps each. On top of that, there is a GameCube version of this game, called Road to the Evolution, which adds a bit of extra content, making the game even longer to complete. I'd personally recommend that version instead, as it has not only more content but also a translation patch available online. Be aware though that the saves aren't compatible between the Japanese and translated version. But now let's talk about what this game does best, the soundtrack. It would be criminal for me to not mention the soundtrack of this game. With a great mix of original tracks and songs from the anime, this soundtrack is a true hidden gem and a lot of the songs went directly into my playlist. I mean, listen to this. Unfortunately, if we stay on the topic of audio, the engine sounds are really bad. And they are not even following the gears properly. Definitely the most boring engine sounds I have ever heard. Finally, I also want to mention the attention to detail, like the rally mode that activates when you go off-road with the Super Asurada. No, this game doesn't have rally, but in the anime this car can transform into rally mode for the rally races. It's just that kind of detail that makes you point at your screen like Leonardo DiCaprio. You can tell the people who made this game really like the anime. The sheer amount of cars and characters that you can play with is also great, and they all have their own voice lines with the actual voice actors from the anime. Well, at least I think they are, ? Overall, I'm really glad I played this game as it made me discover the existence of a great anime that was unfortunately only broadcasted in 4 countries. But it also makes me sad that it stayed so obscure for so long. I can't name anyone that I know that has played a game in this series or heard about the anime. Well, at least before I told them about it. I'll give this game a 6 out of 10, but man, I wish I could put more. It has at least made me curious about the other games in the series. Maybe that could be a topic for another video, but considering the games aren't translated yet, it might be a roadblock. If you're experienced in making translation patches or something like that, I'd be really glad to see one done for the sequels to Road to the Infinity. The series contains a few games that are very obscure, so that could genuinely be an interesting video topic. But now let's move on to the next game. Mom, can I play Battle Gear? But we already have Battle Gear at home. Published and developed by Atlas in 2001, Touge 3, also known as Road Rage 3 in Europe, is not more than what I just said, Battle Gear at home. I don't think I'm gonna spend a lot of time reviewing this game because this is just gonna be a straight comparison with it. It is definitely graphically worse, though I think it's acceptable considering it was originally released in 2001. It has less tracks which by the way are less well designed, the car selection is smaller, and the handling is much worse as the cars are very floaty. It's not terrible, I have seen way worse earlier in this video, but it's just not great. The only interesting addition is drift events, which unfortunately are not very fun. The scoring system is very odd, with a huge emphasis on building up your combo, and the fact that hitting any wall makes you lose the entire event. The game only contains 6 tracks. The very desaturated color palette doesn't help as all the tracks look kinda boring. As a comparison, Battle Gear 3's tracks were very colorful and vibrant, which makes them stand out visually. In terms of layout, they are alright for the most part, but the racetrack has one of the most boring layouts I have ever seen. Each track offers 4 events, 2 races, a drift event and a duel against the Drift King. So in total the game offers 24 races, which is not a lot, meaning that you're probably gonna beat it in 3 hours. I was too bored to do all of it though, especially since it was getting a bit difficult near the end. And not in a good way, as the AI tends to cheat by having much higher amount of grip than you do. As a conclusion, the game is not bad, but it's not good either. And on top of that, you have way better alternatives when it comes to Touge and drift games, even when sticking to the PS2. I'll give this game a 5 out of 10, because it's just terribly mid. And now it's time for the very last game, and I wasn't ready for what was about to come. And oh my god, what a game to end with! Zero Yon Champ series Drift Champ is simply one of the games of all time. Developed by Workjam and Tamsoft. Wait, I have seen this name before. Zero Yon Champ series Drift Champ is the last entry of the Zero Yon Champ franchise released in 2002. It's also the first entry for the PS2 and also the only one to not focus on drag racing, as that's what Zero Yon Champ was always about. This game still contains some drag racing, but it's only side content. There are 3 main solo game modes: Story, Grand Prix and the Record Attack. We'll come back to the story later, let's focus on the 2 others for now. Record Attack is your typical time trial game mode, although you also have a top speed record mode and a drag strip records to beat. The game is divided into 4 classes and you have different records to beat in every class. In Grand Prix mode, there are 3 game modes. The first one is Arcade, which is a very retro game mode as the goal is to cross checkpoints without running out of time, but be aware as the traffic is absolutely atrocious, especially in the last race. The second one is Tournament. It's a massive race bracket where you have to finish in the top half of every race to progress, until you're the only one left. And the last one is Circus, which is a standard 5 race point-based championship. All of these game modes have to be completed in all 4 classes for completion. As for the time trials, they also count toward progression and there are a lot of them, and a big part of them are actually not that easy, so good luck if you want to try to beat all the records. The driving physics of this game are quite something. When I first wrote this part, I had only tried the story car and thought all cars would handle the same, but it is not really the case. FL cars are very tail happy and will force you to drift a lot to get through most corners, though with upgrades they can become very grippy. MR cars are generally a bit less tail happy, and drifting is generally less beneficial. As for the all-wheel drive cars, you have to actually try to make them drift, but it's at the cost of a lower cornering speed and lower turning radius. Same with FF cars, which just amplify this. The handling overall is very weird as the drifts are very difficult to control. Most of the time, accelerating while drifting will make you slide out and lose time, and braking while drifting seems to also reduce your turning radius. So what seems best is to release the accelerator while drifting and let the car slide on its own, and when the corner is done you straighten it and then accelerate again. It's a bit hard to describe, but it is very weird to get used to. Hitting walls while drifting will almost bring you to a dead stop, though hitting walls while you still have grip won't cost you too much speed. Collisions with other cars though are very weird, as it basically teleports you away. Meanwhile, the AI has some of the most nonsensical rubber bands I have ever seen. It tends to pull away very quickly at the start to slow down later in the race like in Ridge Racer, but it feels weird in this game. Also in story mode you'll have a few occurrences of AIs bumping you in the rear at insane speed, but to be fair this might be because I kept using the same car and focused too much on the racing. Focused too much on the racing in the racing games. We'll come back to that later. The chase camera is also very weird. Its horizontal movements are alright, however it's completely attached to the car vertically. Considering the tracks are often very bumpy, the camera will often shake up and down very abruptly, which often made me switch to the bumper cam. Overall, while the handling model and collision physics are not the worst I have seen, they could be a lot better. The track selection is okay, I guess. There's a decent variety of real-life inspired and fictional tracks, whether they are permanent racetracks or mountain passes. There is also a novel and a drag strip, but those are pretty boring, let's be honest. There is also a very beaten up version of Laguna Seca that is still somehow closer to the original one than in The Crew 2. Or maybe not actually. One of my gripes with the track selection is that it doesn't accommodate the driving physics, as some corners are way too sharp for you to take them correctly. Seriously, especially some mountain roads, they are way too technical for the turning radius that the game gives you. And it's even worse if you're using an all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive car, because these understeer even more. Speaking of, the car selection is pretty okay. It's your average JDM car selection for a game of that era, very similar to what could be found in Battle Gear or Road Race 3. There is nothing really special about it, besides a few special American cars that are only used by rivals in story mode, that you unfortunately can't use yourself. Now, a few words about the soundtrack. It is not only good, but it is also very diverse. It contains Eurobeat, trance, rock, and even D&B. And there are also some calm songs out there, mostly using story mode, which are also really nice. Graphically, the game doesn't look great. It feels very dated and really has the early initial D anime look that didn't age very well. Combined to the fact that the tracks don't feature any nice landscape in particular, and to the shockingly low render distance, this makes the game look kinda meh even for the time. Alright, now what if I say that what we just saw was only a small fraction of the game? That's right, it's time for the game mode I teased you all along, story. So, my first experience with this game was a 5-hour stream where I started with the story mode. In this entire stream, I drove for about 10 minutes. Let me explain. First, this game being entirely in Japanese, I had to manually translate all the dialogues one by one to be able to understand what the story was about. This wouldn't be too bad if the game wasn't so heavily focused on the dialogues. While Google Translate isn't the most accurate translation tool, it still allows me to understand what's going on. However, it takes a little bit of time to translate every line of dialogue one by one. Now, what if I tell you that over the course of this stream, there were just about 600 lines of dialogue in total? Yes! This game is closer to a visual novel than a racing game at this point, because the first time I drove a car was almost 4 hours into the stream. Granted, the translation was adding a little bit of time, but I'm sure there is still around an hour of cutscenes before the gameplay starts if you can fluently understand Japanese. The story is divided into 3 chapters. I'm gonna try to summarize the story quickly. You're Rikuto, a high school student. You meet Hikaru, the dark mysterious guy stereotype who's also a street racer. One of the best even. He brings you to the mountain pass and does some racing with you in the passenger seat, cause you don't have a driver's license yet. But then you turn 18 and get your driver license. Your brother gives you his AW11 ML2, the cover car, as he is about to have a kid and the ML2 is not a great family car. And now you can finally drive your car. Yup, I summarized 3 hours of plot in 2 minutes. That's at least all we did on stream, but I couldn't stop there, and I'm glad I didn't, as next we actually raced someone on the mountain pass, joined the local street racer team, and then shit started to get real crazy. As we beat another team that challenged us, they got mad and kidnapped Reiko, one of our team members who they thought to be Ikaru's girlfriend. Then Hikaru brought us to their hideout to immediately see her jump off the window because the other team's leader tried to... Can I even say that? Anyway, she went to the hospital and it turns out she's now paralyzed. And she stabbed her leg with a fork, and then Rikuto asked her to marry him? I'm not very good at summarizing the story, but trust me, this doesn't make more sense when you know everything. I think I'm not gonna spoil it more, but that was like only half of chapter 1. I'm not gonna extend further, but I'm just gonna tell you that once you're done with chapter 1, you'll need to switch to PCSX2 1.6.0 to start chapter 2 as the later versions softlock here. You can go back to the recent version after the first save though. I'm at least gonna tease you a few things that you can do in chapter 2. You can browse the internet, tune your car with a fairly complex upgrade system, and even a few visual mods. You have to manage your money, you can buy random things, you have access to a freaking encyclopedia. You have an actual garage and can put multiple cars in it. You get a job at a car wash and have to wash the cars by yourself. You even have to wash a fucking tank at some point. Then it gets even worse cause you get a job in a Japanese sushi restaurant where you serve sushis by yourself. You also do a bunch of races at Laguna Seca, and I'm not even gonna talk about the story itself as it checks multiple trigger warnings. Anyway, I think I'll stop here for the story mode. Be aware that it's a bit grindy unfortunately, but at least there is a bit more gameplay. As you can see, this game is one of the wildest and weirdest racing games I have ever seen, for better or worse. And I think that could serve as a nice conclusion. Zero Yon Champ Drift Champ is absolutely filled with content and blends a lot of interesting stuff in a racing game to the point you actually doubt that it is a racing game. I have spent around 40 hours on this game, and as of recording this, I still haven't finished it yet. I currently have finished chapter 2 and I'm still yet to do chapter 3. I think that despite all of its flaws, this game deserves a bit more attention. And for all its diversity and personality, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. My main gripes with it are how weird the physics are and overall how slow the game is. Despite being a very ambitious game with loads of content, it just has too many issues for me to give it a better score. Otherwise, I still recommend you to check it out, but be aware it is very slow. I also really wish that it gets a translation patch someday, as it would let more people discover this hidden gem. Well, I'll put gem into quotes because it's a very debatable term for that game, but I think it deserves to be given a chance. Though I understand that a translation patch for this game would represent a massive amount of work. I think I still have stuff to talk about with this game, but I'm gonna stop for now as it's getting a bit too long. And so that's it. We really went out with a bang, did we? Well, that was quite the journey. I'm very happy I tried all these games. Working on this video made me discover some true hidden gems, and I even enjoyed finding out about the bad games. Playing bad games kinda makes you appreciate the better ones more. It reminds you that it could always be a lot worse. Overall, my favorite game in this video is definitely the One Grand Prix, but I'll also give an honorable mention to Future GPX for making me discover the Cyber Formula cinematic universe, as well as Zero Yon Champ for being such an interesting piece of media. If you also happen to play these games, let me know what you think about them in the comments. As for me, I'm now gonna rest for a bit, as this video took a hell of a while to make. I really hope you enjoyed it, leave a like if that's the case, and if you want to see more you can also subscribe. I'm often streaming a variety of racing games on Twitch, so you can also check me out over there. And that's about it for me. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again for the next video.